Hello and welcome to this video lecture on Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 in your book. So today we're going to be talking about the different phases of database design. What do you do in order to get the information that you need in order to design your database? So that's where the conducting interviews comes from. And then to make sure that you're actually solving the problem that the person that's contracting to write this database is done correctly. You want to come up with a mission statement, and then with that you want to do your mission objectives. So that's what we're going to be talking about from these two chapters. So as you think about what you're doing in these phases of the database design process, it's important to go through this entire design process regardless of the type, the size, or the purpose of your database. If you don't, you're going to miss a step, and then you're going to wind up leaving something out, and then having to go back and change things. And those changes just multiply if you don't get them early on. And so a small change that you have to go back and make can lead to lots and lots of other changes because of that one little small change. And this is how projects get delayed. So you want to make sure that you get all the information in the correct type of database up front that you want to design. And so another way of saying that might be that a partially designed or inadequately designed database and not going through this entire process will give you the false impression that the database is designed correctly, when in fact it's not, which leads to even more problems. So your goal then is to minimize these potential problems that you might run into as you're going through this design process. All right, so according to this book, there are 7 phases. Depending on which books you pick up, you might have 7, you might have 11, you might have 4. But in fact, you're going to cover all the things that are mentioned here. It's just that they combine them in the different phases. So the first thing you want to do is define this mission statement and mission objectives. Then you want to see what they're currently doing. So this might just be writing things down on paper. Then you're going to actually get the information that they want to automate. Then you're going to create those data structures. You're going to do the table relationships. You're going to define those business rules. That's the reason for the database and the main purpose there. Then you're going to establish those views. Remember, views were queries. It's the queries that are used for your reports, or these views. Now, these views can also be used for other people that want to analyze the data even further. And then you want to make sure that you've got the right information, and the right information is getting output in those queries. So you want to do that integrity. Is the data good or not? So let's say you go and you tell somebody about this course you're taking, and you tell them, oh, I'm doing Access Database, and I'm learning how to design a database. And they go, oh, why don't you help me design a database? I have these needs at work or at school or in some organization. And so where do you begin? And so the beginning starts with the interviews, talking to people. And I always stress this one first. You start the process by defining the end result. That means your output of this database is going to define what you need in order to get your inputs. And so your output are all the reports that people or managers or users of the system want. And so if they need an output of all the customers' names and addresses, then that's some data that you're going to need to collect and get into the system somehow. And so again, the output, what it is they want from this database, is going to determine your input. So in order to not have this database design go on forever and ever, you need to identify and declare the purpose of this database. Exactly what it's going to be for and exactly what it's going to do, and that is your goal in terms of what you're going to design. And so you're going to start off with interviews. And so that's a very important of this database design and information gathering process. And notice here it says those interviews can also be part of the information gathering tool. A lot of times in newer books, they'll call this the requirements analysis. And so that's what you're doing, is you're doing an interview to get the requirements for the system. I'd also stress that initially when you start these interviews, you're going to gather information, and if you're doing this as a consultant, you're going to not spend a whole lot of time getting your initial requirements, and you're going to make a decision on whether you should proceed or not. And so you don't want to spend 3 months doing requirements analysis only to figure out, oh, we're not going to be able to do this because it's going to cost too much. And so I don't think that was stressed enough or even mentioned in these first 2 chapters of chapter 4 and 5. But that's the other thing you got to do, is you got to determine early on whether this is a feasible project or not. So what exactly are the purposes of interviews? And so interviews help you provide valuable communication between you and the people who are going to use the database. So you want to have that communication so that they will give you the information they need, they will trust what you're doing, and you're involving them in the design process. And so to me, there are 2 types of users, and I'll stress this some more. They're the people that are going to actually be using your system and the people that are paying you for developing the system. They can be one and the same, and sometimes they're different. And so if you're going to have these interviews, you need to ask the users exactly how they want things laid out, what it is that they want from the system. Then there's a person that actually controls the finances of getting this paid for, and they're going to want certain things as well. And they may want the same things, or they may want additional things. And so you've got to talk to both of those users and make sure that you're getting that into your database design. Otherwise, one or both of them are going to be unhappy, they won't use the system, and then it'll be a failure. So I can't stress enough that you see in item 2 here, it ensures the success of your design efforts. Involving people and all types of users that are affected by this database is a must, because if you don't get buy-in from certain people, they may cause the system to fail or badmouth the system and say, oh, it's not doing what we want it to do, you shouldn't use it. It becomes a waste of time and effort. And as you're talking to those people, like I said earlier, whether it's the person that's paying for it or the actual users of that database, they're going to provide you that information that you need in order to know what they want out of the database, so you can design the structures to hold the data that's going to be able to produce what they're wanting in their reports or outputs from that database. So if you need to define exactly who your interview sources are, those are going to be your users or employees, management, and owners of that database. So the owners, again, might be the actual end users, might be within a department where other people might not even use the system, but they might use the reports of the system. And so you need to make sure that they're going to get what they want. Some participant guidelines. Make sure that all the participants are aware of your intentions. Let them know what you want to discuss. Let them know who are some other people that you're going to be interviewing, when and where you want to interview them. Also reassure them that this interview is not disguised an assessment of their performance. So, a lot of times users are resistant to change, and so you're going to have to act as a change agent as well. And so you're coming in there, you're going to be doing something that's going to change the order and the way they're going to work. If it's a new database, especially with the processes that they have in place. So they may be thinking you're trying to come in there and replace them or something. And so you need to make sure that is not the case. Or they won't give you the information that you need in order to design a database that's required. You also want to let the participants know how much you appreciate their participation in the interview and how their responses are going to be used in the overall design of the project. And so you really want to try and motivate them to give you as candid an answer to your questions as you can get. And so you need to be sincere and honest in your dealings with these interviewees. And be nice that when you came back, that you would show them how you've used their responses in the design of that database. So a lot of times that design of that database is going to be a prototype. And so you come back with a prototype that shows them exactly how that database is going to look and work and feel. And it's based on their suggestions. And then you would come back and make further suggestions or changes based on their suggestions in a second interview type. So, I'm saying a lot of things that are probably not mentioned in the book, and it's just from my own experiences in terms of developing databases, both for here at the university, down at the Student Health Center. I've also designed some from several factories, waste management programs, and so on. And so, everything this book is saying is correct, but there's a little bit more in depth to it, and I'm trying to provide you that information as well. Another thing that you need to make sure of is that everybody that's being interviewed and you're dealing with is that you are the official arbitrator when problems come up. And so you're going to be doing things that are in the best interest of that database and of the user who's going to be using it. The next thing I want to talk about is some interviewer guidelines. And so one thing you can do is make sure you conduct your interviews in a well-lit room. So it's probably not in the area where they're working. So it would be in maybe a conference room so you can get away from any distracting noise. Make sure you have comfortable chairs, a comfortable environment. You don't want it dimly lit. It kind of takes away from the mood in terms of, again, making them engaged in the entire process so you can get all the questions answered correctly. You don't want to have too many interactions going on, so you want to limit the number of people that you might be interviewing at any given time. Here the limit is 10 people. I would say you might even go lower, but probably no more than 10. Because you have to think there's going to be some people that might be intimidated by other people that are in the room and won't speak up. Then you might have a lot of people that want to control the conversation, and that becomes a problem as well. And so you need to identify that when that's going on. And so think about how many people you want interacting and and talking at the same time as you're asking questions. On 3, you want to separate your interviews for users and management. And so that gets back to eliminating that fear factor. And like I said earlier, the people that are actually using the database have a different perspective on what they need to have as an output of that database, and also a different organizational perspective. They may see that other people are going to use this database now or use it in different ways than what management might envision for how that database is going to be used. Also, by interviewing them separately, you're going to eliminate some conflicts that happens when they disagree about certain aspects of the organization or the database. But again, you're going to have to determine what's in the best interest of the database design and the use of it in the organization overall. And I'm going to pause right here, and when we come back, we'll start the second part of this video lecture.